This is Syria at the turning of the page, the past in flames and a new hope rising. As news spread that Bashar al-Assad had fled the country, people took to the streets in jubilation. After all the years of dictatorship we've lived through, we were in prison, says this man, and now we're out and at the moment where we're going to build the greatest Syria. That's what this man is promising them. Arriving in Damascus to speak at the Great Mosque, the main rebel leader Abu Mohammed al-Jawlani, an Islamist who marshaled disparate rebel factions to end more than 50 years of brutal dictatorship under the al-Assad family. He called the defeat a turning point for the region. He also promised healing for a country soaked in loss. This woman says 13 years of al-Assad's repression has cost her dearly.
My cousin, my son, my family, all of them.
The rebels arriving in Damascus freed some of the prisoners from the Sadnaya prison, as they've done in other cities. Al-Assad's jails, black holes of torture and death, into which the regime's opponents often disappeared. Elsewhere in the city, there was looting, some residents finding themselves in the presidential palace, helping themselves to a few souvenirs. The former Prime Minister Mohammed al-Jawlani, who said he wouldn't leave the capital, has been designated as a transitional figure by the rebels, clearly eager to present themselves as a group with a plan, also aimed at calming regional concerns. Those celebrating the demise of the al-Assad regime weren't confined to Syria. These were the scenes in neighboring Lebanon, the border crammed with Syrians eager to return home after years of exile. Mohammed Syria hasn't seen his family since fleeing the country 8 years ago. He says all Syrians will now be safe because the one who threatened them is gone. And Ian, Russian state news agencies are reporting that al-Assad is now in Moscow and has been given asylum.
Margaret, there's still lots of questions about what comes next for Syria. Are people worried?
Some are, of course, but many really are focusing on the need to acknowledge today as a moment the end of a barbaric regime, one that has used barrel bombs on its civilians, chemical weapons, laid whole cities under siege. They really want to feel the importance of what's happened and acknowledge it now.
Margaret Evans in Beirut tonight. Bashar al-Assad's stunning downfall is being felt across the Middle East tonight, both his allies and enemies confronting this new reality in the region. To Syria's east, Iran was a key ally of Assad, helping to prop up his rule for years, which is one reason why, to the south, Israel has been hostile to Assad. But it was Turkey to the north that backed the rebels that toppled his regime and are now in control of most of the country. Tom Perry is in Jerusalem tracking the reaction as Syria's role in the Middle East changes quickly.
While Syrians across the Middle East who were forced from their homes by their country's civil war or fear of a brutal regime celebrated the downfall of Bashar al-Assad, Syria's neighbors were taking stock of a radical shift in the region's political balance.
Millions of Syrians who were forced to leave their homes can return to their land.
Turkey, which backed the opposition to the Assad regime, is urging calm.
The new administration must be established in an orderly manner. The principle of inclusiveness must never be compromised.
Iran's government, a staunch Assad ally, issued a statement calling for the swift end of military conflicts, the prevention of terrorist actions, and the commencement of national dialogue with all sectors of Syrian society. Qatar and Egypt are calling for unity and a preservation of the Syrian state and national institutions, the fear that opposition factions could further splinter the country and plunge it even deeper into chaos. Israel has sent troops into a buffer zone along its border with Syria to monitor, temporarily it says, the situation on the other side. Israel's prime minister, at the same time, taking credit for weakening the Assad regime and hastening its downfall.
This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters. It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its oppression.
The Israeli military is continuing its airstrikes in Syria, reportedly targeting arms facilities and ammunition depots, looking to keep the weapons of a now fallen regime from falling into the hands of anyone who might use them against Israel. Tom Perry, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And the ripple effects of Assad's downfall could extend well beyond the Middle East. As Ellen Morrow explains, Europe, the U.S., and Canada are all watching closely to see what happens next.
At Syrian embassies around the world, the rebel forces flag already flies. This groundswell of celebration tinged with trepidation for global leaders.
It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future for their proud country. It's also a moment of risk and uncertainty.
A sentiment echoed in European capitals and from Ottawa. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau welcoming the fall of Assad's dictatorship, adding Canada urges order, stability, and respect for human rights.
The main thing right now is just to make sure people are safe and secure. Try to get to a period of stability is really the critical first step.
While rebel leader Abu Mohammed al-Jawlani has rejected ties to extremism, now promising an inclusive future for all Syrians, he and his fighting forces have their roots in al-Qaeda. Splintered factions across Syria and a lingering ISIS presence, all adding to a complicated mix.
Disengagement right now is not an option, because when you have a vacuum, that's when the bad actors come back.
Actors the West fears, like Iran and Russia, both spent billions propping up Assad.
All of that has come to nothing now. They've lost their most important ally in the region. And I think this changes the entire geopolitical landscape for the Middle East.
The West is now considering its next steps. The UN insisting Syria's future must be decided by Syrians themselves.
If the government that emerges from this transition in Syria is in fact more pluralist, more open, more inclusive, I would hope Western governments and the American government would be willing to invest in and support.
But first comes the long-awaited and daunting task for Syrians to chart their own path forward. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada has welcomed tens of thousands of refugees fleeing the Syrian civil war. And so the fall of the Assad regime has touched off celebrations here too. Lisa Shing brings us the hopes that so many now hold for the future.
A long-awaited celebration for a community that's been through so much.
We are very happy. Free Syria, free Syria, free Syria.
News that Bashar al-Assad's brutal regime has collapsed met with joy.
Finally, the Syrians can get the safety, the dignity, and freedom that they deserve.
Nearly 14 years of unrest and civil war left 500,000 people dead and pushed millions of others to flee. Tens of thousands settled here in Canada, many of them now coming together from Vancouver to Winnipeg to St. John's to start the process of healing from decades of rule under the Assad family.
So there's so much generational trauma. For some of us, it's our parents. For some, it started with our grandparents.
Even though the future is uncertain, there's a lot of hope here about what comes next, especially since almost everyone here has a personal story, a connection to the suffering.
Amir Fatal came here as a refugee 8 years ago and has been watching the news closely.
We are worried about the chaos and who's going to lead the country. But I'm laying on the smart people and the great politicians, the Syrian politicians all around the world.
And for many, mixed with the uncertainty of this moment is a clear idea of what they want to see.
The next one who's coming is going to be one who we choose, one who's going to raise this flag, the green flag for Syria.
That's a country, a civil and mature, a country that contributes to the global economy, a country that is pioneer in many areas.
Hopefully we build our own Syria where it's a home for everyone.
A home many here hope they can see again soon. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.